Nevins Library this evening. My name is Sarah Sullivan. I'm the Assistant Director here at the library, and I'm very happy to introduce tonight's speaker. Jamie Blanco is a Methuen resident, author, actress, and an award-winning news radio producer. She hosts an iHeartRadio podcast, but she's here tonight to share this very special story. This memoir that she'll be sharing with us tonight was started by her father, Jimmy. And he started writing this after he was given his terminal cancer diagnosis. Jimmy was one of the longest living survivors with this particular brain cancer and devoted his life to bringing hope to the hopeless. Please help me welcome Jamie Blanco, who has now finished and published the book her father started, Hope for the Hopeless.
Thank you very much for that introduction. And I just wanted to, I know, I'm sure. And I just wanted to welcome all. Before I start, I just wanted to give a really sincere thank you for being here. Some of you I know and love, and thank you so much for being here. Some of you I am just meeting today. But this is my very first in-person event. This is my very first author, meeting people, not on the internet, and actually face-to-face events. So I thank you so much for being here. And I'm really thankful to be here in the Nevins, as I've mentioned to a couple of you. I live here. I've spent a lot of my adult life in Methuen, and I've been bringing my kids here their whole lives. And it's just a really special place to be doing this event here today. So thank you to the Nevins, and thank you guys. A little bit about myself. I was born in Miami, Florida, the daughter of Cuban immigrants, growing up down there. And, while I've lived most of my life down here, a lot of this story takes place in Miami, where I grew up with my family. I, as she mentioned, work mostly in radio, but I've had a 15-year-long journalism career, starting in TV at WSBN in Miami, moving up here to WHDH in Boston, where I worked my way through college at Emerson College. I spent some time in Washington, D.C., where I was a manager at a CBS radio station there. I got to be able to socialite for a while. That was fun. and then I had my son, and we moved back here to be closer to family and grandparents, and it's just been a wonderful experience ever since. I came to WBZ News Radio, where I worked for 4 years, and I was a news producer there most recently. But then, come 2020, a little something happened. Not just the pandemic, I had a baby. So my daughter was born in 2020, and it just so happened that I had a newborn, and I had a son entering remote kindergarten in the middle of a global pandemic. So I decided to step away from journalism for a little while. And that gave me the time to finish this incredible project that I wanted to share with you guys here today. So I know that I always knew that my father had written this book, and so I'll go back a little bit to where the story starts for me, back when I was 9 years old. My father, Jimmy Blanco, was a healthcare worker. He was a respiratory therapist, and he worked like 100 hours a week. He was such an incredibly hard worker. He grew up on the streets of New Jersey to very poor, impoverished immigrant parents, and he went through a lot of violence and a lot of hardships and troubles in his early life. So when it came time to have his family, he wanted to make sure that his kids had everything and that they didn't want for anything. So he worked his patootie off. He worked his butt off, and he was always working. And he didn't necessarily have the best diet. He was living off of fast food. He had 3 young kids to support, and it was getting to the point where it was kind of unsupportable for his body. And he was 36 years old, the same age that I am today, with 3 young kids. When I was 9 at the time, when he got his diagnosis. He was on his way to work, driving his van in the middle of the night to Miami Children's Hospital, where he would take care of very sick babies. and he had a grand mal seizure on the way to work. And I think that that night was possibly the first miracle that he didn't crash, head on, because there was head-on traffic coming. It was a narrow two-lane road, and somehow he gently, even though he was having the seizure, gently rolled into someone's front yard and crashed into a statue of Buddha. Which he says was a sign from God, but they took him to the hospital. They said, you have this, and you have a tumor in your head, and he had emergency surgery right then and there. And there are photos in this book of exactly that event. So he went from being what he thought was, this very healthy guy who had never really been sick any time in his life, to suddenly facing this terrible, terrible disease and prognosis. So that's, you probably can't see very well, but that's us. So he had just had his surgery. That's me making silly faces because I did not realize what was happening at the time. My brothers and my mother. And so this book is sort of a narrative, but also includes a lot of my research that I feel will be helpful to other people. So, I'm sorry. He received this prognosis and this diagnosis. You have a glioblastoma, multiforme, grade 4, and you have less than 4 months to live. And you're going to die, no matter what. Unfortunately, he had some pretty negative experiences with the doctors at that time. They gave him no hope. They gave him no recourse. They said, this is it. You can do chemo and radiation, but that will only buy you a couple of weeks. So go and get your affairs in order. Now, my father, if any of you had met him, he's not the kind of person to just roll over and say, okay, it's time for me to die. He was a huge personality. He was a very big personality. He loved making videos and movies, like before there was even that kind of technology. He would love like this, what you can do on TikTok and all that stuff today. He would make videos with magic tricks and stuff like that. He was just very much into photography and all of that. And he just had a very big personality. He didn't take no for an answer, and he had that very New Jersey, esque-ness about him. And being a medical professional himself, he knew how to advocate for himself, I feel like, in a way that other people didn't. And it was very frustrating for him to be told, this is the absolute end, and there's nothing else that you can do. He was asking the doctors, well, can I talk to other patients who have this diagnosis? Can I, visit the cancer center? Can I see what the chemo and radiation is all about? And they kept telling him, no, you can't talk to anyone else. You can't, you just need to do this now. And there was one interaction in particular with this unfortunate, and there are plenty of very good doctors in the world, but it was just very unfortunate that he had this interaction. And my father asked him, well, why can't I talk to other patients? Are they all dead? Laughing, jokingly. And the doctor said, yes, they are all dead. And I think right then and there, he decided that he wasn't going to listen to them, first and foremost. But the other thing about my dad was he had a very deep faith in God. He had a very, very strong faith. And up until that point, he got into medicine because he felt like he wanted to make a difference. And he felt like he wasn't really making that difference after 10 years in medicine, or, helping with respiratory therapy. He felt like he wasn't making the difference that he wanted to. He saw so many terrible things happen in the hospital. But when this happened to him, using that faith of his, relying on that faith of his, he said, this is my purpose in life. That this is the purpose that has finally been revealed to me, and I am going to use this sickness as an opportunity to prove the doctors wrong. To show them that I'm going to beat it, and that God is going to heal me, and I'm going to find a way around it, no matter what they say. So there are strong religious themes in this book, but don't be turned off if you're not a religious person, because there's a lot more to it than that. He talks about mental fortitude techniques like visualization, meditation, hypnosis, you name it, he tried it. he made it his mission, essentially, to prove all of these doctors wrong. And there was the faith, there was the mental fortitude, which I just mentioned, but also one of the biggest components of his healing was the nutritional part. So like I said, he was pretty unhealthy in the way that he ate. It was mostly junk food. He had never tasted a carrot in his life. Okay, and that's true. And suddenly he went and he started to try to find information and ways to help himself. And there wasn't a lot of information back then. This was like very early internet. It was hard to kind of make those connections. And he started to find these communities of people and health food advocates, and little by little he started gathering information and learning how to treat his body better, right? So he started reading books that people recommended. He started to go listen to speakers speak. He started to go to health food stores, getting recommendations, trying to find any tidbits of information that he could. And everything that he learned, he put into this book to try to help other people. Because he knew from day one that he was going to be doing something very, very different. And he wanted to prove what he was doing, so he documented what he took, what he did for himself, every step of the way, so that he could eventually help someone else. And he couldn't have possibly known. He couldn't have possibly known that it would work, in the very beginning. But his faith was that strong, and his mentality set, his mindset was that strong, that I feel like he set himself up to really receive that healing, to receive that miracle, to receive that transformation within himself. We talk a lot about the power of the mind in this body. We talk a lot about, in this book, we talk a lot about the power of nutrition and healing and what is in nature, and how all of those things can come together to reorient yourself, bring healing to yourself. Because one of the things that may or may not be, that is lacking a little bit in healthcare today, is the healing part. It's not just the throw a drug at it. It's very reactive, and it's not what is the core issue here, what is causing the onset of this disease, and how can you help yourself, mind, body, and soul, and prime your immune system to attack that disease and bring healing to yourself. So he couldn't have possibly known that this was going to work. But 2 or 3 weeks after his initial surgery, he stood before his congregation, and he declared before all of them, I am going to be healed, and I'm going to prove all of you wrong. He was given 13 weeks to live, right? Less than 4 months. He lived 8 years with a glioblastoma multiforme grade 4, which is the deadliest, most aggressive, most invasive kind of brain cancer out there. This is the same cancer that killed John McCain, Beau Biden, Ted Kennedy, and they had access to, the best that medicine has to offer, the best that there is. But there was something about what my father was doing that was slowing the progression of the disease. Now I'm not like claiming miracle cure for, no miracle cure, but something about what he was doing for himself and bringing that healing in for himself was slowing the progression of the disease, so that this tumor that normally recurs within weeks and will take you, within a matter of weeks, it's very invasive, weird cellular structure, like it's very, very hard to treat and get and stop. Something about it was slowing it down so that, weeks turned into years. He didn't have a recurrence of this tumor for 3 years, the first time around. Then he had an amazing surgeon. They were able to get it with clean margins. That means they got, pretty much everything that they possibly could. And then it was another 2.5 years. And then another 2.5 years. So he was able to buy himself all of that time. And time that he was able to spend with us, his family, his kids, and spend that time with us and be there for us. So this book is sort of a narrative. It starts off with me introducing the book, and this is my incredible husband, everybody. He's part of the reason why this book was possible and I was able to put it together, because it was a very difficult process of writing. And he's just amazing and really, really awesome. So just, if we could get more, I'm happy. So it starts out as a narrative, and it starts with me telling the story from my perspective as a 9-year-old with, a sick parent and not knowing what's happening. And what sort of happened, I set it up, I set up the book for you. And then the middle, and then it goes into my father's story in his own words. Everything that he documented, everything that he went through, everything that he felt, the conversations that he had with the doctors, and his hopes, his despair, like it's all there. And in that narrative is that part that he wrote. And then it concludes with the research that I did on the factors that I believe contributed the most to his longevity. And what I do as a journalist, I bring all of my research skills into it, and I've conducted a number of amazing interviews that sort of go really in depth into each of those factors that I believe really helped him live as long as he did. I spoke with a naturopathic oncologist, Dr. Ian Beyer, who's based out in New Hampshire, not far from here. And we talk about naturopathic oncology and bringing in that whole body, holistic, mind, body, soul approach into treating cancer. And what's really great about today is that back then, when my father was sick, he was sick in 1995, back when I was 9. There wasn't so much of working together between the standard, medical establishment and holistic, naturopathic. They called them quackopaths or something like, was it? I forget what they called it, but it was considered quackery. It's like it wasn't even accepted then that that stress hormones, for example, could harm your body, which now we know definitively that they can. So there was a disconnect there. Nowadays, it's very encouraging that a lot of mainstream medicine has the complementary factor to it, and that you can bring these people into your treatment plan. You can bring in the naturopathic oncologist, you can bring in the nutritionist, you can build that team around yourself, which is something that I really advocate and push for in the book as well. So I speak with Dr. Ian Beyer about what naturopathic oncology is, and it's really fascinating because there are some cancers that respond to radiation and chemo. There are a lot that don't, and he kind of looks at it as a statistician almost. It's like, well, if we go with this course of treatment, you have this percentage of survival, and so he looks at it in a very logical way. And okay, so there's no chance that radiation is going to help you here. Let's really go at it with everything that we've got, sort of deal. And I feel like it's really important to be your own best self-advocate, because there are still doctors out there that will pressure you into a course of action that maybe you don't feel like is the best for yourself, or maybe you haven't done all the research yet. It's very, very difficult. And I feel like that's another reason why I wanted to put this book together, was to bring all of that research together in one place to help anyone who's in that spot, who's like, what the heck do I do? So I have a resource at the back of this book, and also for free on my website, hopeforthehopelessbook.com, that has a list of recommended reading, of books, of helpful websites, to help people get the information that they really need to make an informed decision for themselves, without the pressure of, you need to make this decision now, And it's also important to have positive people in your circle. If the doctor doesn't believe that you are going to survive, you need a new doctor. You need someone who's going to believe in you. You need that, that team. You need your professional, oncological, the people who are treating you need to be on board with you and believe in your healing journey. But you also have to have those positive people around you. And I got to speak with Michael Veltri. I call him Michael Veltri Sensei. He was my Aikido master when I was in DC. I did a little bit of, it's a Japanese martial art. But he is a keynote speaker, inspirational speaker, business maven. He's a like 7th degree black belt in Aikido. He's an incredible, incredible guy. Big dude too, real tough. You don't want to mess with him. And he is also a cancer survivor. He was in the prime of his life, you know, very macho guy, very strong, 29 years old, when he found out that he had testicular cancer. And they caught it early, he thought he was in the clear, and then it spread to his lungs. And he had this, he had surgery, he had very intense chemo radiation. And when I was talking to him for this book, like this very strong guy that I look up to, like he was in tears. He was in tears because it's such a difficult journey, you know, that it's hard sometimes to stay positive. It's hard sometimes to really be able to know how to fight for yourself. So he gives some really incredible advice on how to stay motivated, how to build that positive energy around yourself. And there's more, you know, in there as well to help you build yourself up. On the nutrition side, I spoke with Chuck Carroll, who they call him the weight loss champion. He also is a podcast host. He is a plant-based diet and nutrition advocate, and he had some really great insights. He does a lot of really great interviews with nutritionists and things like that. So he brings a lot of really great insights into the book, as well as, you know, my own research around it. And then we tackle faith. We tackle the faith aspect of it. And I got to interview international best-selling author Lorna Byrne. And she's the author of the Angels in Your Hair books. It's a series of books, and people call her the Angel Lady. And she kind of takes me on the spiritual journey side of things, and the power of faith to heal. We talk about the power of faith to heal, the power of faith to help you die with grace, because at the end of the day, maybe some of us, it is your time. So we do get into that bit of the conversation as well. All of those things matter when it comes to healing. It's not just throw drugs at it and, oh, okay, so you're dead. It's all of those parts, because all of those parts are you. You know, it's the faith, it's the mental part, it's, you know, who you are, your body is a part of the earth, and, you know, you are a natural creature, and there are things in nature that can help to heal you and center yourself. So we talk about all of those things that sound a little bit hippy-dippy, but it makes sense when, you know, when you look at the research. So I'm really proud of the interviews that I got to do in this book. There's also really great research coming out for glioblastomas. There are some clinical trials that have produced super survivors who have surpassed 10 years of life. And there's one woman in particular who I talked to for the book. Her name is Sandra Hilburn, who lives out of New Jersey, and she's approaching 18 years living with glioblastoma. And she's been doing a, what's it called, an immunotherapy vaccine treatment out of Duke University. So a lot of cool stuff coming out of Duke University in particular. So I make sure that I talk about that as well. So it's a narrative, it's a story of what my father went through, how he fought for himself. It's also my story as the child of a sick parent towards the end of the book, which is, you know, more my part. I do talk about the caregiving side of it as well, and how difficult that can be, and how important bringing in a mental health professional is, or someone to help, or being aware of the whole mental health aspect of it, because it can be very, very, very difficult. And I talk about how visualization and faith not only saved my father, but saved me when I was going through the most difficult parts of my father being sick. So all of that is there in there for you. It was very hard to write. So I'm just glad that it is done, and I'm really proud of how it came out and what is there for you guys. Like I was mentioning, the resource that I have at the end of this book is for free on my website, hopeforthehopelessbook.com, and I'm constantly updating it on the website because they won't let me keep reprinting these things. But I always update that resource when I find something new and I think that would be helpful. I'm constantly updating the website. So I did want to talk a little bit too about the process of writing, and then I was going to open it up to questions if anybody had any questions. And we're at 7:30, cool. So it's a really cool story how this book came to be. As I mentioned, my father started to document everything that he was doing, and he was probably, most likely, we don't know for sure because he never got diagnosed, he was most likely dyslexic. He had a lot of trouble reading and writing. It was very, very difficult for him, but he was relentless. He never gave up, and I remember him, me growing up as a little kid, growing up watching him day after day on the computer, typing away, as hard as it was for him to write everything down, to document his journey. So I always knew that the book existed, because I grew up watching him write it. But at the time of his death, when I was 17, because the disease did eventually catch up with him, and he did pass in 2003. But at the time of his death, I was 17 years old. I was trying to help my mom and my younger brothers and keep our family afloat. I didn't know what to do with it. None of us knew what to do with the book. So unfortunately, it sat there. It sat there for a good number of years. And I eventually was able to leave home. I was able to go to Emerson College, get my journalism degree, start my career, and get all these incredible skills and have my incredible journalism career that I did have. And in that time, I gathered these skills. After 15 years after my father died, my mother found the book. She found the book that he had been writing. And I want to show you guys what she found. She found this giant, moldy, leather, binder, trapper, keeper thing. And inside were hundreds of pages of his original writing, still intact. So this thing has survived hurricanes and floods, and it was in a shed. It says, "Fight for what's yours," one of his chapters. And it was just sitting it had just been sitting in a shed for 15 years. And incredible that it survived all of the floods. My mother gave it to me, and there was no digital copy. It was just this. So I went to Kinko's, and I scanned hundreds of pages into the computer. And my amazing husband, using his Outlook skills, because computers hate me, he helped me to transfer it into a Word document that I could edit. So the first 2 years of editing this book, that was about five and a half years ago. Five and a half years ago. So the first 2 years of putting this book together were just editing my dad's horrible grammar. It was pretty bad, the spelling and everything, like I said, probably dyslexic. But so the first few years was just cleaning that up. But it was difficult because I always knew the book existed, but now I was reading it as an adult, for the first time, through his eyes, and experiencing everything through his eyes and his perspective. So it was really rough. It was a lot. So, admittedly, I had at least 2 mental breakdowns writing this book, and he will tell you. But he got me through it. And then after that, I feel like was even more difficult. It was my part. It was writing how this story from my perspective, from my eyes. And, that was by far the worst. That was by far the hardest and most difficult thing to do. But I felt that it was really important to do because there are other people going through this. There are other people that are suffering and don't know where to turn, and I feel like it could genuinely help them. So that was always the goal. And I got to use my journalism skills. I got to interview all these really cool people, and I was really, really proud of that, and that was the fun part, was just doing all the interviews. In particular, Lorna Byrne, the angel lady. It was just a wonderful, very healing conversation, and I hope people get that out of that as well. So the last 3 years was just, you know, me trying to keep it together long enough to write and finish this off. And eventually I finally was able to get it to a point where it was almost done. So very close, but I couldn't quite get myself to finish. And one other thing about me, I'm also a background actress, as we were talking about today. So I occasionally am on sets like movies and TV shows and things like that. And I met this incredible woman named Jury Love, who is an actress and also has her own book about her surviving sex abuse. And it's called A Gift from Adversity. And when I started to tell her about my book, she's like, Jamie, it's gonna get done. It needs to get done. Here's your deadline. What's your favorite number? And I told her my favorite number. She's like, you have until like July 7th. You've got like, she gave me like 6 weeks. And I want you to turn it in, and it's what I needed. Because I'm a journalist. I can't do anything without deadlines. So she gave me a deadline. And that's what I needed. That was the thing that I needed to push me across the finish line and really get me there. She also was a published author, and she recommended me to her publisher. And it was just very fortuitous, and it felt like it was meant to be. And I'm just so grateful for that whole journey and process. And I'm so glad that it's done. And it's out there. Yes, so is he. Very happy that it is done and that it is out there for people to read. So now it's just a matter of, you know, spreading the word and letting people know that this story exists, and if it's something that can help them or help a family member, you know, please share it, and God bless. You know, I hope that it genuinely brings some healing, some direction, some help to anyone out there who's facing a health crisis, or really any kind of crisis, because I feel like there's something for everybody in this book. So that is my presentation. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer any questions, to put you on the spot.
So, with your siblings, was there a lot of back and forth with them about what to include in the book, or was there any sort of, I don't know?
No, it sort of kind of was an all-me project.
Okay.
Yeah. Because, you know, I talk about the mental health part. My brothers took my father's illness very hard. And they had a little bit of a rough life, you know, because of it. I mean, they're fine. They're fine, but it's, you know, it's been really rough on them. And I think re-experiencing that, they didn't really want a part of it. And I understand that, and I totally respect it. Because there are a lot of members of my family that feel that way too, where, you know, they're supportive, but they couldn't possibly read it because, you know, it's just reliving all of that. So, but my mom's been very supportive and all of that. So. And she lives here now, which is great. Yeah, we got her up here. Yeah. She's watching the kids right now.
Winter's just like Miami.
Yeah, no different. Trying to get her used to it.
You say your father chose his own decisions for, like, did he do chemo and radiation?
He did not do chemo and he did not do radiation. He did neither.
Wow.
So he only did, he radically altered his diet. He took natural supplements with the direction of a naturopathic oncologist. He did his mental fortitude techniques, and he relied on his faith, and that was it. He never did chemo, he never did radiation, nor any other medical interventions other than surgery. And he lived 8 years with the GBM.
Amazing.
That's why every doctor that I've spoken to,
At least get one round in, that would be my, you know, like, he didn't even do one round of anything.
No,
Wow.
he did no rounds of anything. And every doctor that I've spoken to for this book has called it a miracle. But the point that I think that he's trying to make is, why does it need to be a miracle? Why does it need to be a one-off? Why, you know, and then you can feel his frustration a little bit that no one, you know, no doctors followed up with him. No one asked him, why is he still alive? You know, what is he doing that's working for him?
But he must have had a team of doctors other than these other people, right? Or no?
He had an oncologist and he had a surgeon, but that was it.
But he
And
just didn't rely on them for anything.
He didn't rely on them for anything, no. And
They didn't quit on him.
he didn't want to listen to his oncologist, so the oncologist was very frustrated with him.
I was just gonna say, they probably said, well, we don't want to deal with you then.
Yeah,
Would
they absolutely did.
Okay.
They told him you're not allowed to talk to other
Right.
patients. They were very frustrated with him, and at
Right.
his third surgery, he had to, instead of having surgery in Miami, he had to have surgery in Los Angeles because they refused to treat him. Because he refused a protocol of chemo wafers.
Right.
They wanted him to put chemo wafers in his brain. He said absolutely not, and they said we're not going to treat you. So
Right.
he had to find another surgeon that was out in Los Angeles who would do that surgery for him. Yeah, and that's the crazy part of it, and that's why I wanted to, you know, be as thorough with my research as I possibly could, because there was something extraordinary going on here, and it deserves more attention, and it deserves more of a close look, because it could help other people. And I really feel like it's that mind, body, soul approach, and acknowledging that as a part of healing that I think made all the difference for him.
So I don't have a question, I have a comment.
Mhm.
When you had talked about, well, at one point you named all the different things, you said, I know that sounds hippy-dippy. I want to say it sounds holistic.
There you go.
And that to me is really the core of your father's miracle,
Mm.
is he took all these different aspects of his life and he worked to utilize them for healing. So
Yeah.
anyway, thank you.
Mhm.
Hippy dippy isn't that bad.
No, I don't want her to imagine people dismissing it, because what she's saying is each one of those aspects is so
Yeah,
fruitful for health and wholeness.
it's just, you know, it's so tough because back then everyone dismissed him.
Yeah,
And
I'm sure.
it was really hard, you know, because there was something that was working. There was
And he
something
made it more than 8 years.
8 years.
Well, I think it's important to dismiss things once in a while. My grandfather was a doctor. He graduated from Tufts in 1909. And he said, you don't have to listen to the doctor all the time. Don't take every pill. He said, I wouldn't take anything except aspirin if I were really in pain, because for everything you take, there's a side effect. So, and my mother was diagnosed, she came from a family where if you didn't die at 41 from heart disease, you lived into your 90s. And seriously, her sister died at 102
Well,
after that. Well, anyway, my mother was diagnosed with multiple myeloma. Before I get to that, my father died when I was 17 too, but not from cancer. It was a severe hemorrhage and he was gone. So, but I wanted to see, when I read the posting upstairs, what you had to say, because a couple of things have been going on lately that I was curious about, thinking about my mother, who was diagnosed at 73 with multiple myeloma and given 18 months. So her attitude was, fine, I got the diagnosis, let's get on with things. And she didn't talk about, she'd answer a question, she wasn't poo-pooing anyone, but she just didn't pay any attention to it. She was enjoying her life, she was involved in jobs that she didn't work until after my father died, and she was in her 50s. And, she had several jobs that she loved. She started taking painting classes and stuff. So they gave her 18 months, but she lived for 11 years.
yeah.
So, so one of the things that I got out of all of this stuff was that if I wanted to feel good, because I've had cancer and I have multiple sclerosis, but I don't let any of it really get in my way. It's just, you know, what'll be, and you know, there's a way to feel good about what's going on, no matter what it is.
Yeah.
That's
Happiness is a treatment as well. Happiness is a treatment.
absolutely.
That's amazing.
I had something to say, I don't know what I have ADD. I'm sorry, I come up with it. What was it? Well, I've seen a couple of doctors over the years. When I was diagnosed with the multiple sclerosis, my doctor waited for me to come in for my appointment, then made a phone call, and he was on the phone with his hand, he put his hand over the mouthpiece, and he said to me, by the way, you do have multiple sclerosis, but you should be able to walk for the next 10 years. And then went back to his phone call.
Oh my God.
But that was 30 years ago, 40 years ago.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I decided to do some other things too. And I'm glad to see this because, I'll tell you in a second, but I just found that eliminating negative people from my life has made a huge difference.
Yes.
Yes, when I first moved where I'm living now in senior housing, a woman came across the street and just was going to tell me about the people who live upstairs. No, I really don't want to hear about it. She's been very nice to me, but and that was the end of that. Whenever I've met anybody who starts that kind of stuff, and I'm not interested. Let's talk about something else. My mother used to say, let's talk about Freilingsraten, which was Yiddish for happy things.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you point your life in that direction.
Because I talk a little bit about, stress hormones and how, damaging that is to the body.
Yeah.
And when the doctor says you're gonna die, like it's just all, you're suddenly flooded with these stress hormones, you don't know what to do. Now they want to inject poison into your body. It's not conducive to healing. And there's also a book that I referenced that I read. It's called Radical Remissions. Mm-hmm. And it's a book entirely of just these stories of people who defied the odds by miraculous, circumstances, and they all seem to have the same factors in common. Let me see here. It's called there's Radical Remission and Radical Hope. Are the two books that I recommend everybody read. But the commonalities that she found were radically changing your diet, taking control of your health, following your intuition, using herbs and supplements, releasing negative and repressed emotions, increasing positive emotions, embracing social support, building a team, having those positive people around you, deepening your spiritual connection, and having a strong reason to live. So, and the people that they researched for these books had all of these things in common and have these similar stories that have these incredible stories of survival. So there's more to it. There's so much more to life, and there's so much more to healing, and it's we're only scratching the surface. I just want more stories like this.
I'm so happy to see your book, because I a while back I met a woman online in a political group of Bernie Sanders, but I get sick of Facebook and stuff like that. I mean, wasn't on it. Recently I went back and I discovered she has in the meantime she had uterine cancer and it spread, and she couldn't get any pain medication unless she agreed to sign up for hospice. And she didn't want to do that because she didn't want the treatments to stop. And all that. God, what do I tell her? How do I engage with this? And then I saw your book and I was thinking about my mother and how changing your attitude can change your life. And she has an upbeat attitude anyway, but she's at that point where she's stage 4 and feeling like she's got one foot on a banana peel and the other home.
I hope that there's something in the book that
I
can
hope
bring
so.
some peace, some hope, some inspiration, and some tools. So, but I mean, you've shared some really extraordinary stories yourself. Thank you for sharing those.
Yeah. Well, I think I've walked out on 2 doctors this year myself, just because of their attitudes.
Well, you keep going.
Yeah.
Tell them. Keep going to the curb.
It's amazing some of the things they'll say.
Well, they think they have all of the answers, and they're so reliant on Western medicine without regard to anything else.
Mhm.
And they're arrogant.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just,
They can be.
there's some wonderful ones, but.
And then there's another one, when I had my breast cancer diagnosis, I was very lucky with that one. The radiation doctor, she sat me down and she said, if you're going to have cancer, this is the one you want. Okay, let's start this.
Not anything anybody wants. I don't know why they say that.
didn't need any, it
Yeah.
wasn't anything treatable by chemo anyway, so, but it was one that was less than a centimeter and it had it for 7 years apparently, it's that slow growing.
In
No
situ.
treatments, just, just a
Yeah.
lumpectomy, yeah, but that was rough.
Well, thank you so much. This has been
Yeah.
wonderful.
Thank you.